Is Israel committing genocide? Reports from Amnesty International and other human rights organizations indicate that the actions carried out by Israel in Gaza since October 2023 meet the legal definition of genocide under the Genocide Convention of 1948. These assessments stem from documented mass killings, the destruction of civilian infrastructure, forced displacement, life-threatening living conditions, and a surge in dehumanizing rhetoric. All of this raises serious concerns that there is an intent to destroy the Palestinian population as a group against a backdrop of widespread international inaction. The situation in Gaza has been worsening since the campaign began. Independent observers have struggled to compel decisive intervention from global leaders, leaving many to question why the world has remained mostly silent. Concerns have mounted that the failure to halt these actions has only emboldened a pattern of abuses. Despite mounting evidence, the international response remains passive, allowing these atrocities to continue with little meaningful opposition or accountability. Defining genocide under law. The Genocide Convention of 1948 defines genocide as acts carried out with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. These acts include killing members of the group, inflicting serious bodily or mental harm, deliberately creating conditions meant to bring about the group's destruction, preventing births, and forcibly transferring children from one group to another. Amnesty International's report details how Israel's actions in Gaza seem to align with several of these criteria. It highlights killings, the infliction of serious harm, and the deliberate creation of destructive living conditions for Palestinians. According to the report, genocidal intent can exist alongside stated military objectives and does not need to be the sole motivating factor. In Gaza, the combination of these factors has raised urgent questions about whether a campaign of genocide is unfolding before the world's eyes. Killings and psychological harm. Between October 2023 and October 2024, more than 42,000 Palestinians were killed in Gaza, including over 13,300 children. Investigations show these casualties frequently occurred through direct or indiscriminate attacks on densely populated civilian areas, where the use of large explosive weapons often resulted in high numbers of dead and injured. In many cases, airstrikes targeted civilian structures with no apparent military purpose nearby. The survivors of these attacks have reported profound psychological trauma. Constant threats of sudden violence, the loss of loved ones, and the widespread sense of insecurity have all contributed to deep mental scars. Many Palestinians now live with ongoing trauma and severe health consequences that make it nearly impossible to lead a normal life. This situation has created an environment that systematically destroys the physical and mental well-being of an entire community. Destructive living conditions in Gaza. In Gaza, Palestinians endure catastrophic living conditions that appear designed to bring about their physical destruction. The Israeli military campaign has restricted basic supplies of food, water, and medical aid, leaving the population vulnerable to widespread malnutrition and outbreaks of disease. Hospitals have been bombed or forced to close due to a lack of resources. Water and sanitation systems have collapsed under relentless attacks. This crisis has led to a devastating humanitarian catastrophe. Every layer of infrastructure that a population needs to survive has been undermined. Experts note that the scale and speed of destruction in Gaza are unprecedented in modern conflicts. The blockade and the deliberate targeting of critical civilian resources have made life unsustainable. This kind of systematic deprivation raises alarms that the conditions are being created not merely as a byproduct of conflict, but as a way to push Palestinians toward extinction. Systematic displacement and forced evacuations. The Israeli military campaign in Gaza has forcibly displaced the overwhelming majority of the population. Since October 2023, about 1.9 million Palestinians, over 90% of the population, have been pushed from their homes. These forced migrations have often involved the controlled demolition of civilian structures, not merely as a side effect of conflict, but in an apparent attempt to create strategic buffer zones and security corridors. Military orders for evacuation frequently gave civilians only 24 hours to leave, leaving people confused and unsure where to seek shelter. the instructions were often contradictory or inaccurate, further endangering those trying to flee. In northern Gaza, an estimated 100,000 people have been completely cut off from any form of humanitarian assistance. Human rights organizations have labeled these tactics as war crimes and crimes against humanity, pointing to an unmistakable pattern of deliberate displacement and destruction of civilian life. Land grabbing and ethnic cleansing. Israel's activities in Gaza and the West Bank have coincided with systematic land seizures and the forced displacement of Palestinians. In 2024, Israel authorized the largest land grab in the West Bank since the 1993 Oslo Accords, involving nearly 24 square kilometers of Palestinian territory. This aggressive expansion of settlements has come alongside forced evictions and the demolition of Palestinian homes. In East Jerusalem, around 87 Palestinian families face ongoing legal proceedings initiated by settlers. They aim to remove these families from their homes in the Batan al-Hawa area of Silwan. The United Nations Human Rights Office has condemned these practices as violations of international law that may amount to war crimes. Similar actions have taken place in the Negev region, where an Israeli court approved the forced eviction of 500 Palestinian Bedouins. Combined with the mass displacement in Gaza, these measures suggest a deliberate effort to alter the region's demographics and carry out what many observers describe as ethnic cleansing. Dehumanization and genocidal intent. Dehumanization has been a critical factor in enabling acts of genocide and other mass atrocities. By stripping people of their humanity, perpetrators find it easier to justify extreme violence. In the Gaza context, Amnesty International identified more than 100 instances of Israeli officials using language that dehumanized Palestinians or openly called for genocidal acts between October 2023 and June 2024. Although some researchers note that dehumanizing language alone does not prove genocidal intent, the rhetoric in this case often portrays the extermination of Palestinians as necessary. This language surpasses mere insult. It recasts Palestinians as threats whose elimination is a purported requirement for security. By framing Palestinians in this way, high-ranking Israeli officials create an environment that normalizes and rationalizes the idea of annihilation. Propaganda and dehumanizing narratives. Israeli propaganda has employed systematic use of dehumanizing language, justifying military actions by portraying Palestinians as less than human. Such depictions draw disturbing parallels with historical instances where mass atrocities were preceded by rhetoric that defined entire groups as subhuman and therefore expendable. High-ranking Israeli officials have used terms like human animals to refer to Palestinians. This type of language shows that the narrative is not limited to fringe elements. It is part of a calculated strategy that makes it easier to rationalize civilian casualties. Western media outlets often amplify these perspectives, giving disproportionate attention to Israeli narratives while marginalizing Palestinian voices. Even in this skewed media landscape, Palestinians are using social media to tell their stories directly to the world. Their efforts counter official propaganda, although they face significant hurdles in getting their message heard and taken seriously. Media's role in shaping perceptions. Western media coverage has played a critical role in shaping how the world views the crisis in Gaza. Prominent networks and newspapers in the United States and Europe have been repeatedly criticized for biased reporting, often underrepresenting the Palestinian experience and even dehumanizing them through omission or subtle language choices. Human rights advocates argue that this kind of coverage influences public opinion, steering it towards sympathy for Israel's narrative and away from the full complexities of the conflict. As a result, essential facts, such as large-scale civilian casualties and systemic destruction, are often glossed over. In recent years, Palestinians and their allies have turned to social media platforms as a more democratic space to share eyewitness accounts, document abuses, and shift public perception. Through these efforts, global awareness is beginning to change as people gain access to alternative information flows. Diplomatic shielding in international forums. International diplomacy has also played a significant part in shielding Israel from accountability. The United States, in particular, has repeatedly blocked resolutions at the United Nations Security Council that sought to censure or hold Israel accountable for alleged atrocities in Gaza. By using veto power and other diplomatic maneuvers, the United States and some of its Western allies have prevented meaningful actions that could pressure Israel to halt its campaign. Beyond the Security Council, these same nations often vote against or abstain from resolutions in the General Assembly and other global bodies that criticize Israel's conduct. This pattern of support has provided Israel with a diplomatic shield. Critics argue that such unwavering backing not only undermines international law, but also raises serious questions about the moral credibility of Western countries that claim to defend human rights worldwide. Military aid and arms supply. The United States has taken a leading role in supplying Israel with weapons throughout the Gaza conflict. Since October 2023, Washington has dispatched more than 100 shipments of arms and other military equipment, including tens of thousands of artillery shells, rounds of cannon ammunition, and thousands of 500-pound bombs. In August 2024, the Biden administration announced more than $20 billion in additional arms agreements with Israel. Other Western nations, such as Germany and the United Kingdom, have contributed to Israel's arsenal, though at a smaller scale. Germany provided a significant portion of Israel's weapon imports in 2023, and the UK continued to supply components for advanced fighter jets and drones. Human rights groups have warned that by continuing to arm Israel despite mounting evidence of potential war crimes, these nations risk complicity in what some now identify as genocidal acts. Calls for halting arms exports have grown louder, but the shipments continue. The role of Western allies in supporting Israeli actions. The military and diplomatic support from Western allies has played a key role in enabling Israel's campaign in Gaza. Beyond weapons, these allies have offered political assurances and strategic partnerships that help Israel maintain its military strategy without facing serious repercussions. The United States has remained at the forefront, rushing advanced bombs, guidance systems, and artillery to Israel's military immediately after the escalation in October 2023. F-35 fighter jets, one of the most advanced pieces of military hardware in the world, have been sold in large numbers. Germany has also provided subsidized naval frigates, torpedoes, and armored vehicle parts. Although European leaders, including those of France and Germany, have voiced concerns, these worries have not translated into meaningful action. Amnesty International and other human rights organizations have called for immediate stops to these arms transfers, warning that the ongoing support only deepens the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. International response to allegations. The international reaction to allegations of genocide in Gaza has been fractured and uneven. Some countries have demanded immediate ceasefires and independent investigations. South Africa, in a rare step, filed a claim of genocide against Israel at the International Court of Justice in January 2024. Amnesty International and other NGOs have urged arms-supplying countries, especially the United States and Germany, to halt their weapons shipments. Yet, most Western allies have continued to back Israel, arguing that the situation is complex and that security concerns must be addressed. The stalemate has made it difficult to hold Israel accountable for its actions. Without a cohesive and forceful international response, the pattern of atrocities has persisted. Many observers worry that the global community's indecision and lack of coordinated intervention may only serve to encourage further abuses. The case for genocide in Gaza. A range of human rights groups, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, have presented evidence that Israel's actions in Gaza resemble a case of genocide. There have been mass killings, deliberate destruction of crucial infrastructure, and life-threatening conditions imposed on a civilian population. These acts, coupled with official rhetoric that has dehumanized and threatened Palestinians as a group, suggest an intent to annihilate or severely diminish an entire population. While some nations have pushed for scrutiny and ceasefires, others have continued to provide military aid and diplomatic cover, allowing the violence to continue with impunity. As civilians suffer, infrastructure collapses, and displacement intensifies, the international community faces a critical choice. Will it intervene and demand accountability, or will it remain silent as evident acts of genocide unfold in Gaza? The world now stands at a crossroads, and how it responds will shape not only the fate of the Palestinian people, but the standards of global justice for generations to come.